So it's my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dave Fitzgerald. Dave is the Vice President, Treasurer, and CFO of Carris Reels in Rutland, and he's the current chair of the Esop Association. And Dave is the most tireless, energetic, excited supporter and cheerleader of employee ownership I think I've ever met. So that's a real treat that we get him here with us today. And Dave, I learned about an epic adventure that he had recently. And when I heard about that, I was like, whoa, that is way cool. I got to do something like that sometime. And then I thought about it for a few more minutes. I'm like, no, I don't think so. So I don't know if Dave's going to maybe share a little bit of that today. But in any case, help me give a warm welcome to Dave Fitzgerald.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the kind introduction, Chris. So my speech today is entitled Sharing Ownership, Better Together. Some things are just so right, it seems like they were meant to be. I think the combination of employee and owner is one of those things, like lemon and lime, like peanut butter and chocolate, like plants in the garden on a bright, sunny summer morning, like fishing and beer, like Triscuits, hell of a good French onion dip, and smoked oysters. Okay, maybe I'm the only one that likes that combination. The company I work for is proud to be a long-standing supporter of the Vermont Employee Ownership Center. We are also proud to be long-standing contributors to the Employee Ownership Foundation, members of the Esop Association, the National Center for Employee Ownership, and ESCA. We believe all of these organizations play a vital role in our movement. I'm going to talk today about sharing ownership and that notion of synergy, but first I want to tell you a little personal story. My grandfather, the Reverend Boylan Fitzgerald, started his career as a Methodist minister in the 1930s. Then he became a renowned landscape painter. How about this picture of skiers on a woodland mountainside? Then he became the editor of the Artist magazine in New York City in the 1950s. And finally, he became an entrepreneur. In 1961, he built a resort in the beautiful Adirondack Mountains of New York State. In the winter, the ski instructors rolled out the red carpet. In the summer, the pinto horses were the featured attraction. And that's me in the bottom right more than a few years ago. So was a dude ranch, ski center, motel, restaurant, bar, nightclub, and event center. It was in the same town as Whiteface Mountain. Maybe you've heard about the giant Whiteface, the 1980 Olympic mountain near Lake Placid. Last September, I realized a dream I didn't even know I had when the book I wrote about my grandparents' business was published. It was one of those vanity books. Another term I've heard for it is passion projects. I think I like that term better. But I did get carried away, and I had no choice but to make it 515 pages long and over 185,000 words. So now, officially, I'm an amateur author. And I'm not here today to promote my book, In the Shadow of a Giant, which is available from Amazon. It peaked at like bestseller number 507,000. But on our theme of synergy, I can tell you I did not accomplish this on my own. I had lots of help. Anyway, I wanted to tell the story of what it's like to try and operate a business when all the odds are stacked against you. I think there's a lot of happiness in the book. A lot of people, like me for instance, had some of the best moments, the times of their lives, their best vacations ever, their weddings, their honeymoons, their first jobs in and around that business. But what's it like for the owner and his wife who see the sinking checkbook balance, year after year of more money going out than coming in? The worries of a business owner who is always on duty, or at least always on call. It's a world of risks, struggles, and sleepless nights. and then to have to depend on the weather. What if it doesn't snow? What if it's too warm to make or keep snow? The dreaded January thaw. I think this newspaper clipping from 1964 says it well. Snow in Siberia, dancing here tonight. Business owners worry about making the payroll, paying the taxes, providing for people who depend on the success of the business, the employees, their families, and the communities beyond. And the last thing I'll say about it is, like so many family-owned businesses, it was shared ownership. A heavy burden on Nana and Grandpa, husband and wife, shared ownership. Often, tiny family-owned businesses get to evolve into employee-owned businesses. And fortunately, maybe the burden can be shared a bit. I know the CEOs of employee-owned businesses bear an enormous burden of worry too, but probably some of that can be delegated, like let's say to the CFO, for example, or the CHR, vice presidents, and so on. Employee owners too, each just a little bit even. As the ancient Swedish proverb claims, a burden shared is half a burden. Of course, there's so much more to shared ownership in an employee-owned business than sharing risk, like maximizing opportunities, for example. Anyway, lots of great businesses start with a single innovator, then maybe businesses built by partners, or maybe a family. And a lot of great employee-owned companies were family-owned businesses first. I think it is important for employee owners to understand that owning something together is a lot different than owning something by yourself. When I'm talking to younger employee owners, I like to say something like, let's say you and your brother own a car together, 50-50. Who gets the car on Saturday night? Who gets the car on Sunday? Who cleans the car? Who puts the gas in it? Owning something together is a lot different than owning something by yourself. How about a new couple buying a house together? Maybe that big old bachelor pad needs to be condensed into a tiny man cave in the garage. Maybe that bachelor doesn't care about the relative merits of 30 different shades of beige paint strips or carpet swatch samples. There's some beige for you. But certainly he understands that not every room can be filled with heads and horns, and that's shared home ownership. Dividing ownership by two can be tough enough. How about dividing that by dozens of people, or 100, perhaps hundreds or even thousands of people? That's why we talk about rights and responsibilities, risks and rewards. A burden shared is a burden halved. Mission, vision, values, a clearly identified strategic path forward, unifying statements that bring diverse people together, communications and culture, which looks a little something like this maybe. Let me tell you a little bit about Carris Reels. Before I do, let me mention our top value, our total commitment to safety, which comes first. Our core purpose, which never changes, is to improve the quality of life for our growing corporate community. Our vision is we will be the leading product, solutions, and service provider for our customers and industry, #1 in our niche. By the way, we make packaging for the wire and cable industry, not fishing reels. You might be more familiar with some of our products' aftermarket uses. Our mission is to drive profitable growth through dedication to our work, our customers, our vendors, and each other. I love that last part, and each other. We want to maximize the opportunity of shared ownership and make our Esop a tremendous strategic advantage. The Carris Esop has received great praise for being very progressive, collaborative, and broad-based. Our Esop is fascinating to academics. I could talk about our weirdness and uniqueness all day, and I think at Carris Reels we do take some kind of strange pleasure in being called weird. But what do we think is super awesome? Well, we think it is super awesome when the stock value goes up. When we cross milestones, like the first year someone had an Esop account over $100,000. or the first year someone had a $200,000 ESOP account, or the year when we had paid out more money cumulatively than what the ESOP paid Bill Carris. What's really cool is when someone can retire comfortably at 62 years old. Before the ESOP, people could not retire comfortably at 65 even, but it doesn't go up every year. We've had 7 years in our 23-year ESOP history where the stock value declined. Overall and through time, however, we've been very fortunate. And I want to point out that we remain professionally managed. There is a chief executive who has the power to decide, to approve, to veto, and the responsibility to lead. Personally, I think being a highly participative ESOP does help you maximize the potential of your ESOP. People who have a stake in the outcome do give the best advice on how to improve things and how to make things work better, and on how to do the impossible on a day-to-day basis. In a fiercely competitive economy, that's exactly what you have to do, is do the impossible on a day-to-day basis. I'd like to think we can maximize our results by being well-governed, well-led, well-followed, and well-participated. I like the saying we use, there's ownership in everything we do. Recently, we had the occasion to share ownership by hosting an ESOP to ESOP event. I think a great way to share ownership is to really get to know other employee-owned companies. Become friends with them, have them over, look forward to seeing them at conference. Make sure you meet someone here today. Consider them as not just friends, but mentors and business advisors. Through the years, we've had the opportunity to visit other great employee-owned companies, so this was our chance to do some giving back. We rented a tent and we invited people over. We put on matching t-shirts showing the theme, Reaching New Heights with your ESOP on the front. Backpacks and an employee-owned message on the back. We handed out presents. We fed our guests a great lunch. And we took them on a tour of 3 of our facilities. Here you can see the trail guide, in keeping with the theme, of course, and the orange and white happy ESOP camper bracelet, too. Isn't that a fine piece of jewelry you see on the arm of one of our guests? Oh, and I don't want to forget to mention the commemorative bandana we had commissioned for this event. Maybe our visitors got something out of coming to visit us. I know we got a lot out of the experience as well. From the pictures we took that day, it was clear we had cleaned up good. There was a palpable sense of pride in our company, lots of smiles and high fives. So we put together a video following that special event. I'd like to share that with you now.
The New England chapter of the Esop Association has a wonderful tradition of having a company tour at one of the member companies of the Esop Association as part of its annual fall conference. In October 2017, we were honored to serve as hosts for that company tour. There were 3 things that we hoped to convey for visitors when they came to see Carris Reels. The first is safety. We wanted our visitors to get a sense of our total commitment to safety. Our visitors received safety instructions in advance. We made sure every visitor had safety glasses and earplugs. We planned a safe travel route through our manufacturing plants, and we had tour guides join our visitors so they could look after the safety of our guests. Second, over the last couple of years, we have focused on our facilities. We fixed them up and we've repaired them and we've made them look nice. And we were so happy to have an occasion to show off a little bit after the upgrades we've made in the past couple of years. Another aspect of the company we put on display was the company's culture. We are a decentralized company with lots of locations across North America and several distinct lines of business. Each location has its own culture, so we rescheduled our company-wide meetings so that we could coincide with the tour, and we featured people from all of our locations in giving presentations to our guests. Finally, we had a lot of fun with the theme for the conference, which was Reaching New Heights with Your Esop. Using mountain climbing, hiking, and camping imagery, we had t-shirts printed so everyone in the company wore the t-shirts. It was pretty easy for our visitors to see who worked at Carris Reels. Lunch was on the house, featuring locally famous Gill's Delicatessen. During lunch, we were surprised by unexpected guests from the Red Cross who recognized Carris Reels' generous employee owners for their donation to the hurricane relief funds. We have learned so much from other ESOP companies, like our heroes at Webb Industries. We have so much to gain by sharing our experiences and stories with each other. We hope they got something out of coming to visit us, just as we have gained from touring great companies like Hypertherm, Gardner's Supply, King Arthur Flour, Moody's Coworker-Owned, Sertronics, and Sonolysts. Each on our own pretty impressive, even better together. One thing I think we share with all of these companies is a passion for employee ownership. We have been celebrating employee ownership since our first transaction in 1995. We're working hard to maximize the value of our ESOP accounts by building an ever more awesome company and making our employee ownership a competitive advantage. To say there's ownership in everything we do sounds like a massive commitment. We can deliver on the promise of employee ownership and have a great time doing it.
Another way to share ownership is by growing the company. So I'd like to tell an acquisition story. This story starts with our 2020 strategic plan. It was an aggressive growth plan calling for an 88% increase in sales. We hadn't seen growth like that in years and years. This picture of a giraffe, for me, is a symbol of a stretch goal. A stretch goal rapidly approaching. How in the world are we going to get there? Growth by acquisition, extending our reach to new geographies. And also in the 2020 plan, the notion of our ESOP as a competitive advantage and the slogan, there's ownership in everything we do. So Texas is a big growing market where we had very little market share. But it's okay because we've been kind of talking to a company in Texas for many years because someday we thought they might want to sell. The name of that company is Lone Star Reel, which is really just exactly what you want to call your company in Texas, especially if you're from distant Vermont. Its sales put us well on the way to realizing our 2020 plan with 150 employees north of Dallas, Texas, with one location in the city of McKinney, which is just blocks from their biggest customer, and another location in the city of Bonham, which is about an hour north almost to Oklahoma, plus a branch in El Dorado, Arkansas. 3 great new locations for our company. So I mentioned we've been talking to this company for years. And they asked us about ESOP. We sent them a lot of information. We even talked about the idea of having them form an ESOP and then merging our ESOPs. They convinced themselves that they were too small to form one and that it was too complex, though I would disagree. Of course, there are many, many very successful ESOPs that are much, much smaller than Lone Star Reel. But to make a long story short, they accepted our bid. They told us that another competitor had offered more, much more. They told us we got the deal because we had the ESOP, plain and simple. So there you have it. Our ESOP served as a competitive advantage. So that's where we were in early 2016. We had an agreement in principle. That part was easy, but an agreement in principle is really just a theoretical deal, strictly confidential. Because lots of times these things don't make it across the finish line. We must tell no one, because the first thing you do at such times is sign a non-disclosure agreement and confidentiality agreement. If the word got out and the deal didn't happen, their business could be ruined and we could be sued. Our board met in executive sessions. Our management team whispered about the deal behind closed doors. We really don't close the doors that often, you know. We'd like to think we're improving at being a transparent, participative company with open books and open doors. Then it seems like we spent years trying to make it happen, but it was really only months. So we did a lot of work trying to get ready just in case it really did happen. Fast forward several months, the agreement in principle had evolved to a draft agreement. Perhaps we really do have a deal. Next came a detailed due diligence audit, which felt like living a lie. There was this tiny house, a little mint green building next door to the company, and me and our CPAs from Burlington, Vermont posed as sales and use tax auditors, and the Lone Star Real office people ran stuff back and forth across the parking lot. Time marched on. Spring became summer of 2016. Next thing you know, we're down to the wire. We were keeping lawyers very busy. We were keeping accountants very busy. We were keeping appraisers very busy. We were keeping environmental engineers very busy. It felt like we were standing on constantly shifting sands, and things were continuously being renegotiated. From our perspective, every day of delay, we saw that as opportunity cost and lost profits, so we worked hard to remove barriers. The weekend before, everything was still top secret. We crafted a very detailed, comprehensive communication plan, and we wanted to execute it perfectly. Confidentiality was still very fragile, and somehow we reached the finish line, close of business Friday, September 16th, 2016. Over that weekend, those pesky, fictitious sales and use tax auditors completed and conducted a physical inventory, and somehow nobody noticed our funny Vermont accents. Over the weekend, on Saturday and Sunday, our team arrived from various locations of our company. It seemed like half our company was there. And finally, Monday morning rolled around, and that was one crazy day. I think it was the most stressful day I can ever remember, even more stressful than giving a big, long speech to hundreds of my closest friends. So maybe it's hard to imagine two places more different than Texas and Vermont, right? Just picture it. About 150 people wake up on Monday morning, head off to work just as they always do. It's about 8 o'clock in the morning, and a giant herd of people descend upon them in matching shirts, no less. Lone Star Real's office, management, and supervisory staff have been gathered together in the little mint green building across the parking lot. The president of our company standing by his side, the president of their company makes an announcement. Me and my partners have sold the company to these guys from Carris Reels. They're a bigger company, and they have the kind of culture and benefits that we wished we could provide. They're what we wanted to be when we grew up. Only me and my partners are getting old. His eyes welling up. I'll never forget the face of their plant manager standing there, tears streaming down her face. It kind of felt like we were alien invaders, from Jupiter perhaps, or maybe Planet 51. Being acquired is a tough pill to swallow, and Vermont may as well be Jupiter to the folks from Texas. We felt a little like the blind leading the blind. The next step in our carefully planned communications plan involved the president of our company, Dave Ferraro, going to see the two largest customers. I had the honor of trying to explain what had happened to the employees of the acquired company. It's mighty hard and super stressful to project a happy, optimistic message to employees when the person they have known to be their leader is emoting all over the place. And yet it is completely understandable. It's not easy when your life's work all of a sudden becomes the business you just sold, right? And as if that weren't enough, we bring in new computers, new phones, new paperwork, a new accounting system, new email addresses, new time clocks, And of course, no alien invasion Esop style is complete without passing out matching t-shirts and hugs and sweet nougaty cultural goodness. And so we say, don't worry, we come in peace. Well, we must have done okay because the next day everyone showed up for work. We weren't overly confident that would happen. The theme for our presentation that day was Better Together. So I told you I was giving a presentation to the employees at the acquired company. Our company president was giving presentations to the customers. What about the employee owners of Carris Reels? Altogether, we have 10 sites. We can't be everywhere at once, so our company president recorded a video message and our site managers conducted simultaneous meetings at all the other sites to let them know about the deal and to play that 7-minute video. There were lots of questions. Why didn't you tell us about this in advance? Why didn't you ask for our input? Why weren't we consulted? Why didn't we vote on this acquisition? So we had a lot of explaining to do. We reminded people of our 2020 growth plan, and we talked about those confidentiality agreements. Anyway, by the time we left Texas that week, we managed to convert one of the owners into a hugger, though this particular hug felt more like a tackle. I did not see that one coming. And soon, we hope to be able to convert the wonderful employees in our Texas plants into owners also. We have elected not to have Lone Star Reel adopt the ESOP immediately. First, we wanted to make sure the business model would work the way it needs to. Second, we wanted to take the time to educate the employees in Texas on these concepts of shared ownership. And third, we wanted the employees in Texas to kind of yearn to join the ESOP. I can tell you they're doing a good job demonstrating that yearning. I'd like to think that's because of the ESOP and not because of the pocket full of lottery tickets I'm known to carry during a presentation. I like to call that question bait. Anyway, that's where we are today, about 20 months after the deal in which the closing was really just the beginning. We're doing great in Texas, increasing wages, improving benefits, expanding into a new facility we just purchased, and adding plastic reels to our family of products there. Employees are learning and yearning to become employee owners, and we are very bullish about our growth opportunities from those facilities. Even Texas and Vermont are better together. I've heard some people say that the ESOP movement isn't growing. Sure, lots of great new ESOPs are formed. Also, lots of great ESOPs are acquired by larger companies. By the numbers, perhaps they cancel out. However, ESOP companies are doing acquisitions, and ESOP companies are also growing organically. If you look at the number of employee owners or participants in ESOP plans, I'm sure you'll see very, very substantial growth. Our ESOP movement is growing. Why, soon we'll have 150 new employee owners in Texas. Now I might like to say a few words about sharing our ESOP movement. In my humble opinion, it isn't ESOPs versus co-ops. Recently, I was interviewed by a writer from B Corp magazine. When I saw the published result, I was sorely disappointed. It talked about ESOPs versus co-ops. That was never part of our conversation. So they're similar, so they're different. Who cares? Either way, it's shared ownership. More of one or the other or both, whatever. It's all good. I don't know why journalists do that. I also think we need to be extremely careful with polarizing jargon. Our cause needs to be loved, left, right, and center. And we need to be able to reach all of our politicians with the same words, stories, images, and employee owners. I can tell you from personal experience, the same exact material has won us allies on both sides of the aisle. They may not be better together, and they may not be sharing ownership. But when you look at all the oxes that got gored during tax reform, all the well-funded special interests that took it on the chin, we have to thank our lucky stars in heaven that we kept the laws that provide for ESOPs safe and sound. These days, there is no issue that seems bipartisan. From Obamacare to Trump tax Not one member of the other side voted for either. If our movement becomes the darling of the right, we're toast. If our movement becomes the pet cause of the left, stick a fork in us. The jargon we need to be wrapped in needs to be absolutely inspiring to every end of the political spectrum, almost apolitical even. How can we do this? It is surprisingly easy. Let our employee owners tell their stories to the politicians, what it means to their jobs, their families, and their personal financial security, how their ownership accounts compare to the 401k accounts, the sense of pride. That's the way we win. That's the way we won. Put another way, I don't think we should hitch our wagon to the think tanks of the ideologues. Our messages will get lost in their message. Our message will not be amplified or carried by their message. Our message is simple. We make everyday employee owners kind of rich. We help keep businesses and jobs in the communities where businesses were founded. As Bernie Sanders has said, Esop should be important national policy. Employee-owned companies aren't guaranteed to be successful, but we succeed more often than the alternative. ESOPs have a great 10-year survivability record, and ESOPs have a great 25-year survivability record. In 2 short years, I'll be working for a silver ESOP. You might be surprised at just how many silver ESOPs there are. So last little story before I let you go. On May 5th, I had an incredible experience. Maybe incredible isn't the best word to describe it. For several reasons, I became possessed to make a 50-mile hike from Plattsburgh, New York to Lake Placid, New York. I thought it would be a great way to promote my book. I thought it'd be a great way to connect a lot of the businesses I had written about. And I thought it would be a great way to commemorate an epic journey by a Lake Placid postman named Denny Miller 55 years earlier. Back in 1963, this was a big fad, you know? It was started by a challenge from President John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who I'm sure is my distant cousin. His brother Bobby Kennedy made his own 50-mile hike in a business suit and dress shoes, no less. Anyway, on Denny Miller's 50-mile hike, Denny set a record time, and he delivered an important letter about Lake Placid's Winter Olympic bid. He was 31 years old, and he did it in under 11 hours. I took more like 19 hours. So at 55 years of age, I can tell you I do not recommend it. I would not do it again. And I'm not quite yet glad I did it. It was grueling. It was an occasion for digging deep, really, really deep. And though it was an intensely personal, individual challenge, I don't think I would have made it past the halfway mark, but for my son saying, "I know you can do this," and "You've got this, Dad." And one of the sweetest moments was when my wife and son brought me a vanilla milkshake. That's Aunt Patty there. Also, I turned this walk into a fundraiser for the local historical society, and I also turned it into a fundraiser for the Employee Ownership Foundation as well. So when I felt like giving up, like 1,000 times that day, I thought about my son, and I thought about the people who had donated to the fundraisers, and I thought about sharing ownership, because I knew I'd be giving this speech a few weeks later. So anyway, my last words are, be great ownership sharers. Get emotional about it. Live the dream. Tell everyone you can about employee ownership. Have fantastic retirement parties like the one seen here. Don't get caught up in good ESOPs versus bad ESOPs, because like 99% are great. And don't waste your time on ESOPs versus co-ops, because those are just vehicles anyway. Who cares which one takes you where you're going? Focus on a great journey and celebrate lots of wonderful milestones along the way. Thank you for coming here today. Have a great conference. Make friends, give high fives, share smiles, because after all, we are better together. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. The strategy in our booking of keynoters is to have like a big picture, abstract kind of thing one year, and the next year, concrete. And Dave actually delivered both, so fabulous. Thank you so much, Dave. We do have a few minutes for questions or comments, so please. And we have microphones too, somewhere, maybe, or you can just yell.
So the question is, how did we manage the approval by the ESOP for the merger? So this would be the trustees for the ESOP plan. And just to answer real quickly, when we were talking in the run-up, the ESOP trustees were informed. We have an internal ESOP trustee committee. They were informed about the pending deal, and they had opportunity to weigh in on that. And so that's how we did that.
Microphone over here.
Thank you. When you acquired your Texas location, what were some of the things that you did that got your Texas new coworkers yearning to want to be part of an ESOP?
So when we did the acquisition, we talked about ESOP as something that they would, be eligible to join at some point in the future, and that we were looking forward to having them be employee owners with us. The second day, the day after, when they all did come back on the second day, we had another round, because hearing all of that stuff on the first day is almost too much to handle. So we repeated it again there. We go around to all of the sites for a state of the company presentation, so we've had the occasion after the close of the year to go and talk to people about that, and now we're working on developing a comprehensive plan over the next 2 years, say, and hope they'll be joining our employee ownership aspects. Because once upon a time when, the rest of the company became employee-owned, we all had several years to hear about it and get used to it. That's not the way it happens everywhere, I understand, but we, and with the baby step transactions we did, the rest of the company, we had several years to get used to this growing ESOP, movement in the company. So it's not done yet. We got a long way to go.
Hey there, Dave. So I know when a lot of people take the co-op versus ESOP perspective, one of the big differentiations they pull out is that co-ops are innately participatory, and you pointed out that Carris is very participatory. Could you speak to the importance of that and how you guys implement that?
So the first reaction I have to that is that from a governance standpoint, the Carris ESOP's weirdness is that we have a lot of the elements of co-ops written into the articles and the bylaws. So we do have, for instance, one vote per employee owner, regardless of the size of ESOP account, which is more unusual, I think, or highly unusual in the case of ESOPs. So that can be done, I guess, maybe with a lot of research and careful writing. But what it's, I think, come down to is participation is something I think also that at every one of our companies we can probably find more fault with ourselves that, man, we should have been doing a better job, or we did this thing that we could have done better with participation on. And so I also have the reaction that it's you're never done, you're never perfect, and we're always striving to try to be more participative in the future. But we do have the employees vote for reps, and a lot of the governance of the company is actually done by our ESOP company. So those are a couple quick thoughts in answer to that question. But that I think can be one of the differentiating factors. ESOPs, versus co-ops is a very relative thing to have on the mind when you're considering which path to go down. I was kind of more arguing ESOPs versus co-ops. We're not enemies, right? So.
So some of my staff asked me over the course of the week, where are you going? Where are you going Friday? What's the conference? And, kind of cagey, like, well, I'll let you know. But the question is this, my partners and I have been debating this for a while now. At what point do we tell our employees that this is something we want to do, that this is the legacy we'd like to leave them?
So I'm not an expert legal or cultural advisor to companies on that point, but from what I've seen and heard, there's a huge degree of difference on that. Some companies talk about that very publicly and go through the fact that they're thinking about it. In our case, the owner of the company wrote a long booklet about his hopes and dreams for getting it done, and we had many meetings, 2 years worth of meetings before we ever did a transaction. But I'm also familiar with lots of cases where the owners and their management team kind of put it all together, and it becomes known to employee owners during an announcement celebration. And boy, those are very impactful too. So I don't know that there's necessarily a right or wrong way of doing that, but it's hard to start down that path if you're not thinking of following through. And sometimes, so I think some decisions need to be made. And in our case, Bill Carris had decided he was going to do it one way or another. So it was only a matter of how when he was at his searching point. Does that help? Thanks.
I'm just trying to figure out, so if every worker has a vote, did that mean that all the existing Carris employees knew about it and how to, or not? Is that something you had to do more? You had the confidentiality piece, but then how did it work that the owners weren't voting on that acquisition?
So the best answer that I can give you on that is that, first of all, it's our company, and maybe most are, kind of a representative democracy. There are certain matters on which you do take a vote, and by law, those matters are a very small number of things, but they're very, very big things. So I'll let technical experts answer that part of the question. I know they talk about 4 of them, and like one of them is kind of selling the whole company or mergers. Here in the case of forming a subsidiary and then buying the assets of a company, that did not meet the technical requirements for that. And because of the non-disclosure and confidentiality agreement, we really we couldn't say anything. So, thank you. Thank you.